Sorova's theories rested on assumptions which were unprovable.
We were not willing to wait any longer.
Her aggressive methods created an adversarial situation.
You mined the corridor.
When the Ferengi Council learns of your actions, they will consider this an act of war.
Saving lives is precisely what we're trying to do.
What about the Fleming? How long can they survive in there?
I estimate her shields will fail in approximately 12 hours.
That's all it is, an inconvenience.
Using methods any reputable scientist would never employ.
Your ship could be operational, provided you agree to review our research.
We reviewed Sorova's research.
More research.
I would like you all to put together a research proposal.
That's your response.
I will give it my full recommendation.
I'll have no part of this.
What if the Fleming had been transporting perishable supplies?
That didn't happen.
Or was on an emergency mission? Your little plan might have cost a lot of lives.
Our concerns are much more important.
I suggest we ask the Federation Science Council to send a research vessel to this area.
I know my sister can be somewhat...
It is part of our job to retain an open mind.
There's no point trying to talk to you.
I'm willing to listen to your case.
You've already decided not to listen.
aggravating.
Star Trek has always been about presenting real-life issues through a dramatic sci-fi lens. It's never shied away from even challenging issues, sometimes consulting special interest groups for inspiration and input. This can be a great way to bring urgent concerns to a broad audience. And sometimes it's not. Imagine if an advocacy group for the subject of voluntary euthanasia requested an episode to explore this divisive and sensitive issue, and then the producers gave you Tuvix.
Commander, you gotta stand by and do nothing while she commits murder. Doesn't anyone see that this is wrong?
I will not take Mr. Tuvix's life against his will.
Very well, Doctor. Please step aside.
You might feel like it wasn't quite the positive and constructive voice for the topic that was expected. It's really not as much of an exaggeration as it should be to say that the Next Generation's Season 7 episode, Force of Nature, is pretty much as alarmingly misjudged in the way that it presents its issue, climate change. Seriously, I think it's more likely to make people side against the advocates of green initiatives due to its massively unsympathetic portrayal of the environmentalists, trivializing obtuse portrayal of an environmental concern, and the fact that this is a cheap-feeling, directionless episode that's crammed with filler. Genuinely, this episode is so listless and unfocused, it's hard to know where to begin. Let's do what this episode doesn't and start at the beginning. There's nothing for it. I've got to do a brief as possible précis of the episode as a whole, but don't worry. I won't start off with 20 minutes of tedious filler, like Force of Nature does. We open on what sounds like Geordie relaying a spicy sexual encounter.
Half the time I didn't know if she was gonna lick me or scratch my face off.
But this is actually just some no-stakes domestic tedium, as Geordie suggests that Data needs to train his misbehaving cat. All of a sudden, nothing happens, so we ride this nothing train to the credits. We open again on the briefing room where the situation is laid out. Contact with the medical ship USS Fleming has been lost. It recently entered a spatial corridor, the only such place allowing passage as surrounding space is full of dangerous technobabble. It goes the usual way. The crew take it in turns to make sensible suggestions and then get shot down by everyone else's actually-ing. Worf is up to bat first, and he makes the sensible suggestion that they use probes to increase sensor range, and he gets shot down by Geordie. Troy then chips in, presumably using the inspiration that she gleaned from staring unblinkably at the back of Geordie's head. Genuinely, it's really weird when you notice it. Anyway, she makes a similarly reasonable suggestion and gets shot down by Riker. Then, Dr. Crusher suggests that the Ferengi, who have been in the area, may have hijacked the ship, and since no one can shoot her down, the briefing is adjourned.
All right then, Mr. Worf, initiate your search pattern.
That was Geordie's idea. We've had literally 5 minutes setting up the plot, so it's time to slam the space brakes on and get on with the episode's B-plot. Not that one. The other one. This episode has 2 disposable storylines that fizzle out and have no relation to the A-plot. So Data tells Geordie that the sensors they're relying upon to conduct the rescue mission and save people's lives has suffered a dip in efficiency, so Geordie shrugs it off. See, Geordie is engaged in a Nacelle-Measuring contest with some sort of vague acquaintance from the past, and he's choosing now, this critical time, to try and bump up the, checks notes, power conversion rates of the engines, even though it will...
That would not affect the engines in any way.
Then Data gives him a look, and Geordie begrudgingly agrees to do his job. So the plot moves from Geordie trying to improve the engine's power conversion rates to Data and Geordie discussing the cat and trying to find out which phase buffer is out of alignment. Yep, that's what's affecting the sensors in a negligible way. It's the third one, by the way. The third buffer is unaligned. Just spoiler alert, I guess. So they sort of fix it, and it makes no difference to anything anyway, because Riker said that they've just found a ship on long-range sensors anyway, and they're required to both be of no use on the bridge instead. Turns out that the Ferengi were lured to a buoy. It disabled all their major systems, and they thought it was an attack. The Enterprise offers to help with repairs in exchange for info on the Fleming, and now that we have a plot to sink our teeth into, we do cat stuff again. At least the training Data's cat subplot ends here with a zinger.
I don't know about Spot, but it seems to me your training is coming along just fine.
Then we're doing pointless Geordie engine stuff again. Just as a quick aside, if you're wondering why all of this filler is in here, the production notes point out that the episode came in really short, and a lot of this is because they just couldn't really think of any way to inject any drama into proceedings, so that's the reason for all of this. Anyway, moving slowly on, the Enterprise goes to the coordinates and finds some debris they think is the Fleming, but this is a hoax, and they're hit with a Vertron field just like the Ferengi ship. Not that the episode shows this, because that would cost money. They're left in Technobabble Creek without a Technobabble paddle. A ship appears, and a duo of greasy-haired aliens in boring clothing beam into engineering to say that they demand to be listened to. Kudos to the security team though, they are on fire here. So we get to the point of the episode. Wow, to think we're only 20 minutes in. And now the action can barrel along thin and slow. Since they weren't blasted into oblivion when invading the Enterprise unannounced, these Hikarans speak their piece, and are alleging that repeated warp travel through the corridor is damaging their region of space and harming their planet. So the ships have got to stop doing that. It's an allegory for climate change and environmental ruin. See? The Hikarans claim to have definitive proof, but everyone's a bit skeptical because they submitted this theory before, and it was rejected because even they had to admit it was unsubstantiated garbage.
That research was only preliminary. Our original analysis was incomplete.
I mean, that's on them, right? They submitted incomplete research and expected people to take it seriously. Plus, people aren't really disposed to consider people who disable them without warning to be reasonable. Meanwhile, Data has actually corroborated some of their information.
I agree that is a possibility.
So Picard, reasonably, promises to resubmit their findings with his full support and assist in making their case, after they've rescued the ship that Zorova, the female Hikaran, put at risk. But that's not good enough for her, so she immediately jumps to blowing herself up, placing in a fatal situation her brother, the beleaguered Fleming, her research, the Enterprise, her home planet, and any reasonable chance of being vindicated because she's just decided to cause the problem that she said that she wanted to prevent. Since a plot about environmentalism wasn't 90s enough, the crew figure out a way to use surfing to get out of the corridor or whatever.
When was the last time you went surfing, Commander?
And then we get, a mistake.
And effective immediately, all Federation vessels will be limited to a speed of warp 5.
Yep. So the crew make just a few of the very valid points about why this has no chance whatsoever of working.
Well, the Klingons will observe these restrictions, but the Romulans will not.
And what about the Ferengi? And the Cardassians, for that matter?
Putting limits on warp speed is only going to prevent other rifts from forming. What are we going to do about this one?
And then we peace out to the credits, with the spectre of warp power's damaging effect destined to shape the universe of Trek forever. Or like 2 episodes. Seriously, the feeling of what the hell did I just watch lasts longer than this call to environmental action. So, what was all of this? Well, in the 90s, environmentalism was taken pretty seriously, and it was kind of a cool thing to do to have it as the hot topic in TV shows, either with their own thing.
When the 5 powers combine, they summon Earth's greatest champion, Captain Planet.
Or worked into popular shows at the time.
Certainly we're wrong this time.
Huh. Wait a minute. What do you know? Phil in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was the voice of Shredder in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Anyway, there's not much information for how this episode and the idea of a galactic speed limit happened in Next Gen, except there was some collaboration with an environmental group, and that's where the idea for this episode came from. And God knows who was pointing the finger at whom for the results, but I don't think they did this again. So why didn't it work? Well, I've got a whole list of things, but I'm really quickly going to take a time out to praise something. Enjoy it, there's not much of this. It's Captain Jean-Luc Picard. He's sometimes considered the boring one, but if you want to see a Starfleet officer behaving with fair, considered and prudent judgment, he's got that down pat. Picard plays every negotiation and situation straight down the line. He's always searching to understand the situation, talk a language the other side will understand, and also stay on script as far as his mission goes. This actually kind of creates a problem. He's so reasonable, but we're supposed to empathize with the conflicting perspective. Anyway, on to the outright awful stuff. The first most obvious problem is that this episode is just bad entertainment. Even the guys who wrote the script said that it's a struggle to find the drama in the topic. And they have a point. This episode is stuffed with filler. And it's cheap. Real cheap. And that hurts it. You have this line about the destabilizing space fabric or whatever affecting the Hikarans' planet. But you never see that, even though it would have sold the message to the audience and bolstered the credibility of the claims to the crew. The story revolves around the stricken medical ship Fleming, but you never see it in danger or see the crew get saved or see it blown up. You don't even know what it looks like. There's not even a line of static-filled comms saying they're in critical condition just to ramp up the tension a bit. When the Daemon is on the view screen, the background doesn't look like a Ferengi ship. There's no other crew or anything. Is that a wicker chair? This is clearly a different TNG set they really didn't bother to redress. It's like they said to the environmental group they consulted, hey, we're really on board with this, and we'll represent your concerns in a bottle episode that we're going to crap out just as the series is winding down. Oh yeah, and we'll make all the people on your side of the discussion look like idiots.
There's no point in trying to talk to you. You've already decided not to listen.
And that leads nicely into the environmentalist side is unsympathetically portrayed. I had to watch this episode a few times to do this video, and it got weirder every time to realize that the proposed ecological problem isn't the thing that causes any observable risk or harm to anything. That all comes from these zealots' panicky overreaction and extreme measures. Now, showing a character with strong convictions and motivations is fine, even when what they're doing or who they are could be pretty reprehensible. But there's a reason that these guys still spark discussion today, and these guys don't. Except in this video, I guess. I'm going to try and keep this as brief as I possibly can. I could go on for days, but frankly, the Hikarans are morons. Let's start with Serova. She's explained her findings so poorly that her own brother, apparently a genius level guy himself, can barely grasp what she's getting at. If it wasn't for data, she'd have gone back to shouting at clouds. If you're a scientist trying to build consensus, you have to be able to explain your work, or everyone's just going to give up trying to understand. Third point, consider the Hikarans' plan makes no sense. They could have just threatened to mine the corridor, or mined it and just let everyone know. It's so dumb a plan that even Serova doesn't follow it. Remember when she said this?
We knew that if we disabled enough ships, Starfleet would come.
Well, the first ship they got was a Starfleet ship, and they left it stranded, damaged, didn't even try to communicate or help it. That's the exact opposite of getting their message out. Kind of makes the claim that they didn't want anyone to get her ring hollow. Ditto the Ferengi ship. She knows how paranoid and hot-headed they are, but they didn't communicate with them either. They engaged with the Enterprise, but she does nothing but dismiss their concerns and refuse to accept their help. So what was the point? And then she creates the problem she wanted to prevent, endangering the lives on 2 vessels, plus her bro, and taking herself out. That matters because she's the only person in the galaxy, apparently, who can explain and understand this phenomenon. She is the person who's going to be needed if the problem that she brought to everyone's attention is to be tackled in the future. Another problem is that the drama in this episode is kind of obtuse and lacks urgency. The whole thing is supposed to be an analogy for the erosion of the ozone layer, but it's taken 300 years for anyone to maybe find the first signs of a potential problem with this wearing carpet. And this is a unique place where traffic is really concentrated, unlike anywhere else in space. So is it really a problem anywhere else? And it's only a problem here because Sarova makes it one. It's also weird that the solution is to slow the ships down. It makes it seem more like a PSA against speeding than anything to do with climate change. So after this episode, everyone has to watch their speed unless it's like super important, meaning that there's two things that can happen from here on. We have a story set up and the Enterprise has to fly around like a grandmother driving around while looking for an address, making the drama seem not at all urgent. Or, to make the episode sound more exciting, they have to just be given dispensation to ignore the limit, making it seem like it was never really very important at all to abide by. Either way, some character has to bring up the climate issue so it can either kill the subsequent episode's momentum or be continually ignored. So what's the legacy of Next Generation's environmental episode Force of Nature? It should have been a continuing reminder of the importance of our planet's environmental concerns, something to inform about and inspire action against a legitimate and enduring issue. Instead, it became an itch for a few episodes that would be ignored because it was irritating to write around and really boring. And don't take my word for it. After it aired, the production crew had to get together so someone could say, "Guys, what was that? What are we doing?"
What happened to us?
Well, I have a drinking problem.
We're gonna get fired.
The galactic speed limit has been occasionally alluded to, but in canon it's just not that big a deal anymore because it seems that engines were very quickly developed that would abrogate or massively reduce the carpet wearing effect. Certainly no damage is cited as a result of the potential problems brought up in this episode. Retroactively, it hurts the episode and the characters because it makes this...
They wanted proof. I'm going to give it to them.
The Hikaran ship's engines are beginning to overload. Prepare for impact.
Seem even less rational, and the concerns that it brought up seem completely dismissible. Next Gen was an episodic series, but it did occasionally revisit ideas, but only if they were interesting, or at least some effort could be made to have a dramatic payoff. The galactic speed limit just felt like a nuisance to be endured and then ignored, and nobody is even concerned that the whole concept didn't even get a proper